Flying a drone in Japan can get you some of the most jaw-dropping footage on the planet. But hold on, before you even think about launching, there are some really important rules you've got to know. So today we're breaking down the essential flight plan to keep your drone safe and, to keep you on the right side of the law.
I mean, they're everywhere now, right? Capturing these mind-blowing views, changing whole industries. But behind every single one of those amazing drone shots is a pilot who has to stop and ask one really critical question. Am I actually allowed to fly here right now? Let's dig in and find out.
Some people are calling drones the industrial revolution of the sky. And honestly, you can totally see why. They're changing the game in everything from filmmaking and package delivery to disaster relief. But, and this is a big but, with all that amazing potential comes some pretty serious risk. We're talking about real-world incidents like scary near misses with passenger planes and even shutting down major airports. It's a huge reminder that when you're up in the air, mistakes have very serious consequences. And that's exactly why these rules are in place.
All right, so here's our flight plan for this explainer. First, we'll talk about what it means to be a pilot. Then, we'll map out the actual rules of the sky. We'll cover the paperwork you need, go through the must-do pre-flight ritual, and finally, we'll look at what happens if they go wrong.
Okay, first things first, the pilot's responsibility. Before we even get into the nitty-gritty of laws and regulations, it all starts with this mindset. It's not just about being good with the controls, it's about a deep, fundamental commitment to safety. And this right here, this is the golden rule. The pilot's most fundamental responsibility is to accomplish the flight safely. Every single decision you make, from planning your route to packing your gear, it all has to come back to this one idea. You're the pilot in command, and safety is and always will be job number one.
So how does that big idea of responsibility actually translate into rules you have to follow? Well, think of these regulations as the official map of the airspace. You wouldn't just jump in a car and start driving without knowing the rules of the road, right? It's the exact same thing for flying. You've got to know the rules of the sky.
Okay, so first, let's get specific. What exactly is a drone in the eyes of the law? The definition is pretty broad, but the magic number you need to remember is 100 grams. If your aircraft, and that includes the battery, weighs 100 grams or more, then yeah, it falls under all these regulations we're talking about. If it's lighter than that, it's considered a model aircraft, which has a different, much simpler set of rules. All right, listen up, because this is probably the single most important concept in all of Japanese drone law. It's called specific flight, or tokutei hiko. Seriously, if you can wrap your head around this, you'll understand the core of how everything works. Think of it as the government's official checklist of situations that have a higher risk. And in these situations, you're just not allowed to fly without a proper license or special case-by-case permission. So what counts as one of these specific flights? Well, it's broken down into two main parts. The first part is where you fly. As you'd probably guess, flying around airports is a big no-no without permission. Same goes for any designated emergency zones. Also, any flight that goes 150 meters or higher of the ground or water is a specific flight. And a really big one is flying over what Japan calls densely inhabited districts, or DID. The second half of what makes a specific flight is all about how you're flying. This list is pretty long, but it's all common sense. We're talking about flying at night. That's from sunset to sunrise. Flying beyond your visual line of sight. And no, staring at your controller screen doesn't count. You have to actually be able to see the drone. Getting closer than 30 meters to people or private property is also on the list. And of course, flying over big crowds at festivals or concerts, carrying dangerous materials, or dropping anything from the drone. All of that falls into this high-risk category.
Okay, so let's say your flight plan does involve one of those specific flights. How in the world do you do it legally? Let's walk through the process of getting cleared for takeoff.
The very first step for any drone pilot before you do anything else is registration. It's simple. Every single drone that's 100 grams or heavier must be registered with the government. It's just like a license plate for your car. Your drone gets a unique ID, and it's actually required to broadcast that ID electronically the whole time it's in the air. This table right here, this is where it all comes together. It breaks down every possible flight into 3 categories based on risk. Category I is the easy one. That's any flight that is not a specific flight. So think flying your drone in a wide open field on a sunny day. Simple. Then you have Category 2. This is for specific flights, but, and this is key, you've made sure there are no people underneath your flight path. This requires either a license or specific permission. And then there's Category 3, the highest risk level. This is a specific flight that takes place directly over people or property. For this, you need the absolute highest level of certification for both you and your drone. And as you might guess, those categories line up perfectly with the different pilot licenses. The second-class license, or NITO, gets you qualified for those Category 2 flights. You know, the higher-risk flights where you can guarantee no one is underneath. The first-class license, or ITO, well, that's for the pros. That's for operating in the most complex situations, allowing those Category 3 flights right over populated areas. Okay, so we've gone over the rules of the sky and the paperwork. Now let's talk about what you absolutely must do right before you fly. This isn't just a good idea or a best practice. This is a mandatory part of being a safe and responsible pilot. You have to treat this pre-flight ritual like it's second nature, every single time. First, you submit your flight plan online. Then, you check the very latest weather info, and then comes the physical inspection of your aircraft. And I mean a thorough inspection. You're looking for any little bit of damage, checking for loose propellers, making sure everything is in perfect working order. Because a well-maintained drone is a safe drone. That's non-negotiable. After that, you scan the area for any obstacles or hazards, and you double-check that you have a secure, solid communication link. Seriously, never, ever skip these steps. And once you're airborne, your duties don't stop. Flying under the influence of alcohol or drugs, absolutely forbidden, and the penalties are severe. You have to constantly monitor your drone and the sky around it, and remember the golden rule of the air. Manned aircraft, planes, helicopters, they always have the right of way. It's your job to see them and get out of the way, period. So we've spent all this time talking about how to fly safely, but we also have to cover what happens if an accident does occur. Understanding your legal responsibilities here is absolutely critical. If an accident happens and it's your fault, you could be facing 3 different kinds of legal trouble. First, there's criminal liability. That could mean serious charges like professional negligence and maybe even jail time. Second, there's civil liability. That just means you are on the hook financially for any damage you cause. And finally, there are administrative penalties, which means the government can take action against your license, like suspending it or revoking it for good. And believe me, the financial penalties are no joke. A lot of common violations, like flying a drone that you haven't registered or breaking those specific flight rules, can land you a fine of up to 500,000 yen.
But it gets even more serious than that. The law is incredibly strict about flying under the influence. If you get caught, you could be facing up to a full year in prison. The message from the authorities could not be clearer. It is never, ever worth the risk. You know, when you boil it all down, it comes back to this one simple, powerful idea. Every rule we've talked about, every license, every single item on that pre-flight checklist, it's all designed to do one thing: protect the safety of people, both on the ground and in the air.
So it's pretty clear the sky isn't just an empty playground. It's a really complex shared space. The real question for every pilot isn't just about the cool things you can do with a drone. It's about how you are going to prepare yourself to be a responsible guardian of that space. Thanks for tuning in.